All right, thanks for joining me. We have Dr. Erin Ellis, which is actually my naturopath. And so she specializes in finding the answer to problems that you cannot find the answer to, especially when you're going doctor to doctor and just you have major fatigue, gut health problems, things that like they just don't dig deep enough to really heal. And so Dr. Erin Ellis really helped me with my healing process. And so I really wanted to bring her on. And she came from holistic urgent care, but then branched off into her own, her own practice, which was a huge leap of faith. And so I just really value her. And so thanks, Dr. Erin Ellis.
Thank you, Grace, for having me. It's wonderful. And I'm excited to share all of this fun stuff with people.
Yeah, you're so knowledgeable. So the thing I want to jump into is gut health, because that's pretty much what everything stems from. And so, why do you feel gut health is so important to the body?
Oh gosh, where do we start? Well, I mean, 80% of your immune system is found in your gut. So right there, that's how important your gut is. I always tell my patients, like, an unhealthy gut, you're not going to be healthy overall. If the bowels aren't working, we've got increased intestinal permeability, you've got an autoimmune condition like celiac, non-celiac gluten sensitivity, whatever the case may be, irritable bowel syndrome, colitis. There's so many gut things. And if your gut is not healthy or balanced, you're not going to be healthy. So that's why it's so important. And honestly, it's the first place I start in the healing process, because patients can come to me with like migraines, for instance. And it's like, well, how's your gut? Like, it's the first thing I look at. I've had patients come with these unexplained rashes and their gut is atrocious, and they've seen specialist after specialist after specialist, and no one's addressed the gut. So I always start there. It is so important.
Wow. Yeah. So what does gluten do inside the body, whether you have celiac disease or you have, just a gluten sensitivity? What does that do? What does it affect? Does it only affect your gut, or does it affect other things?
Oh, no, gluten is very, 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 very inflammatory. So people with celiac disease, autoimmune genetic component to gluten sensitivity, like, they elicit an immune response if they come into contact with gluten. Now, there can be a non-celiac gluten sensitivity where you're still sensitive to gluten on an immune response, but you don't really have the autoimmune process. But for literally like all my patients, if we're going to start somewhere to become healthier, that's the first thing I do is tell them to avoid gluten or dairy. They're the two most inflammatory foods. But gluten can have an effect on our thyroid. It can have an effect on, like, essentially everything in the body. And I've seen, like, for you have the gut issues with gluten, but I've seen people get skin rashes. I've seen people get anxiety. I've seen people, the flip end, like they're depressed or mood. I've seen it manifest in different ways. So everyone's different. So it's just good to know that if you're having some of these symptoms that, we'll talk about today, or that you've talked about, and you don't know what it is, like, it might not necessarily just be your gut. Like, it could be affecting, like I said, other organs in your body and manifesting that way. So yeah, it could be anything.
Yeah, I've definitely had it all. I've had that crazy rash all over my body, but also like inside my legs and my blood vessels were swelling up. Remember?
Yeah.
Come see you. And then of course, depression was just a huge one, and anxiety, because it gets my heart rate going when I'm having a response to it. Depression for sure, because you're not getting, I think, the nutrients that your body needs. And so you're like trying to feel better, but you don't. So it's just like, and then also not finding any answers and having like that anxiety of like, why am I still reacting?
Yeah.
I'm on a gluten-free diet too, because I was on a gluten-free diet, for 8 years, still couldn't go to the restroom, and, still suffering. And I'm like, I'm doing everything right. So I remember you stating like, okay, check your products, your beauty products. People don't understand that, like, it's not just your consumption. And I remember when I looked at my shampoo bottle, it had hydrolyzed wheat protein that I was using, and it was literally seeping into basically my bloodstream and causing me to be really, really sick. And it took me 6 months of you kind of figuring out what my sensitivities now are, and then also figuring out the SIBO and all of that, but we'll go into that. So, I mean, it's insane, you know,
Yeah.
your guys' products, right?
Right? Never know. It's sneaky.
I looked on you know, it's like beyondceliac.org, and they're like, it's a myth that beauty products can affect you. And I'm like, absolutely not.
No. Disagree.
Tell you had that. So like with, you know, when you have people that come to you with, you know, that are gluten-free or that have celiac or gut health problems, what like common deficiencies do you see that are kind of related to those? Like, you know, D's, B's, or irons, or whatever, whatever that may be.
Yeah, well, it's first probably important to recognize like how it affects the gut. So it induces this inflammatory response, but gluten also can damage like the intestinal permeability. So think of your gut as like a tight chain link fence. Like all of your vessels, your mucosal cells should be like super tightly linked together. Now, over time, when we, you know, it doesn't even have to be gluten. Gluten is a big trigger, but anytime you've taken an antibiotic, stress, alcohol, birth control, any other food sensitivity, any other stressor to the body, like these tight little links become looser. And gluten directly acts on these tight junctions, like the gliadin and the protein in it, like directly, there's research upon research on that. So over time, it becomes like essentially weak and leaky. And that's where you get leaky gut, if you've ever heard that. Yeah. I like to say it as increased intestinal permeability, because we don't have that like tight little link anymore. So then we're not able to absorb our nutrients. So the first thing I see is malabsorption. You could be eating the cleanest diet, but you're not absorbing any of your nutrients because your gut is leaky and it's just like seeping through. So that's the first thing. And then if you have malabsorption or any increased intestinal permeability, then yeah, you're not going to absorb any of your nutrients. I see very, very low cholesterol, and we need cholesterol to make our hormones. So it's very important for that for women. Vitamin deficiency, of course, like vitamin D, Bs, magnesium are like ones that I test for often. And then of course, increased inflammation, because your body is like, what the hell is going on? Like you have this damage to your intestinal lining. So that's really how it happens and why it happens. So if we don't address that and repair the gut, we're not going to even still absorb. And you can still eliminate the gluten and eliminate the food sensitivities and all of that, but we still have to repair the gut.
Right. And I remember when we were looking at mine, you know, my inflammation was so high that my cortisol levels were high, my iron levels were high. And can you talk about like how iron shows in the blood of like your inflammation, why that is? Or?
Yeah, it could be due to a lot of things. Like you might have a condition with hemochromatosis, which is iron overload in the body. But mostly I see it due to inflammation, and that typically is with alcohol intake. Can be just regular inflammatory process, or we might see a flip side of you more increase in your ferritin levels, which is your storage form of iron. I see that elevated a lot, but that's more of a protective mechanism. Like your body's like, I'm going to save all my iron. It's protecting because there's invaders in your body. And so that's why seeing, you know, naturopathic doctor looking at like outside the box, like I look at other things like candida, viruses, things like that can be, you know, what the body's trying to fight. And so it's like hiding some of the iron, leading to inflammation. So.
Yeah. And I like that you said outside the box, because that's the thing with, I feel like regular doctors is they never really looked at the whole picture. And, you know, I also went to a gastroenterologist, and they told me the same thing. You got to look at your whole body, which was.
Yeah, it's all connected.
Yeah. They kind of were a little bit more on the naturopath side, which I really liked, because then they gave me other ways to also, you know, help the gut heal that. So it was nice to bounce off of both of you guys, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, you're talking about candida. Is candida and SIBO the same thing? And like, you know, what is SIBO for all the people that don't know?
So SIBO it's SIBO. It stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So what that means is that we have good and bad bacteria in our body. We have fungus in our body, which is candida. So candida is fungus. SIBO is bacteria. So what happens is we just have an overabundance of bacteria causing this overgrowth of bacteria. Same thing with candida. It's an overgrowth of yeast. Like we have it, but it only becomes an issue if it's overgrown and we have too much. So no, they're not the same thing. I don't really know if I see really hand in hand a correlation between the two. Like if you have SIBO, you have candida. I haven't really seen that. I've been seeing candida a lot lately, mostly with unexplained anxiety. So patients that are in a very, very anxious state. And I was like, look at this candida that you've got going on. So crush the candida, they feel a lot better. There's other stuff going on usually with hormones and things, but yeah, candida I think is more prevalent than SIBO actually. I mean, I do have a few SIBO patients and you're well versed in it as well, but candida is like, it's crazy. And as women, like we think maybe we can only get like yeast infection vaginally, but like I said, we have candida in our gut. And just think about the foods that we eat, the high sugar foods, like if we're eating a lot of fruit, sugary sodas, any processed food, fast food, carbs, like carbs are essentially sugar. So that's feeding candida. And then, it just becomes overgrown and that becomes an issue. So yeah, that's, they're two totally different things.
Okay. I remember with candida, we kind of went on trying to kill that candida diet and nutrition. What do you recommend when you have that? What to stay away from?
So the high sugary foods, carbohydrates, like there's the glycemic index. So there's low glycemic foods and there's high glycemic foods. So low would be like all of your leafy greens, salads, Brussels sprouts, all of those things. Your high glycemics are like bananas, mangoes, potatoes, carbs, starchy, like all of the alcohols, like all of that is high glycemic. So that's going to increase your blood sugar, therefore feeding the candida. You did the candida protocol. Now, I mean, you're a saint for doing it. I like kind of took that out of my practice because it's a beast. It's so hard. It's literally like so overwhelming. And I just realized that a lot of patients are coming to me and they feel so terrible. Yeah, they feel so terrible that this candida diet can be very overwhelming. Yeah. So I honestly give antifungals now. And I'm like, it's a safe medication. It's not like an antibiotic. It's not going to disrupt your gut anymore. Not like it. It has a different mechanism of action than an antibiotic. So that's why I feel comfortable prescribing, because obviously prescription meds aren't my first line of treatment, but for this case, and especially to get, people feeling better, because they've usually seen practitioner after practitioner after practitioner, and they're just not feeling well for months, if not years. And I was like, okay, well, let's get rid of this, because this is likely affecting this. So if we crush this, and we can work on everything else, giving the body what it needs to heal naturally. So but then I give them the low mold foods, and I'm like, here, let's make sure we're not eating these high foods that are going to, continue to feed it while we're trying to kill it. So
yeah, and it's hard to kill it.
Yeah, it's a beast.
Food. I mean, so I remember you telling me, don't have food sitting too long, like in the fridge. I would do my meal preps and not to make too much food, because that's growing a little bit of bacteria when you reheat it up. And staying away from, I think, fermented foods, right? I breathe in a lot of bacteria and stuff. So that was so hard. I felt so crazy for cutting everything out, but I'm glad I did it, because it worked.
Yeah, and you feel better. So there's another, like there's the candida diet, and then for SIBO, like obviously with that we have too much bacteria. So this is a little bit different instance. So there's something called the FODMAP diet. I don't know if you've heard that in your research, but it stands for like fermentable oligomonosaccharides and polyols. So these are all different. They're really short chain carbs that are actually resistant to digestion. So these foods these FODMAP foods, they aren't absorbed. And so they go to the intestine where most of our gut bacteria is. And now these gut bacteria that are there use these foods for fuel, which
Oh,
then
wow.
produces this hydrogen gas and causes these digestive symptoms. So people with SIBO have like gas, bloating, they're burping a lot, like they have some abdominal pain. Like just think it's like you eat these foods and you're like lighting a fire in your gut.
That's exactly.
So yeah, but most of these foods too are also very high in sugar. Like fructose is a FODMAP food, so we would need to avoid or reduce all of these foods. Fructose, lactose, dairy, fructans, which are mostly grains, galactans, which are legumes, and then your polyols, which are all the sugar alcohols. So like xylitol, sorbitol. So anyone that's drinking like energy drinks or things like that, like that's where they have all these sugar alcohols. So those likely can irritate the gut even further. But still, we have to like, even though we're eliminating these foods, we still have to repair the gut.
Yeah, yeah. And I had both. So, God loves me.
Yeah.
So I was trying to help one thing, but probably feeding the other, Candida. So I know with SIBO, for me, like for my whole life, 28 years until this last year, I literally couldn't go to the restroom ever. Like it was so hard for me, which then, correlated to all these other problems that I had. And once I got on the SIBO, the antibiotic for that, I've literally had a normal like bathroom lifestyle never had before. No bloating, no like interactions with my food every single time, because it got to a point where I was interacting with every single kind of food, and you can't cut. I mean, you got to eat, so you can't.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, well, what are you going to eat? Are you going to eat like spinach?
Yeah.
You got to get food in you. So if you eliminate all of these things, it's like, well, what do I eat?
And then you're not getting the nutrients. So it's just
Yeah.
like a cycle of
Yep.
yeah. Now, which test do you do for SIBO?
So SIBO's technically, it's really the only way to test it. You can get some idea on a stool test, but the best test is the breath test, the hydrogen breath test, where you blow into these tubes and then you send them off for testing. I use Genova Diagnostic Labs for that. It's a kit that you just take home from your practitioner, and then you do it at home and you send it off. Candida is typically blood I can test, or we can do stool testing. There's a really awesome it's called the Gut Zoomer test through Vibrant America that I love. It's expensive.
Oh, that's the one we did.
Did we do that one?
Yeah, we did like the holes. Yeah, the Zoomer, the wheat, and
yeah. So yeah, this one is the stool test. So it's a $400 test, but it's like 26 pages long about your entire gut health, and it actually shows you it can test SIBO markers, Candida, parasites, but it also tests your risk of developing, like, say, cardiovascular disease or things like that. Like, it goes through every single organ system, and there's specific strains and things in your stool that they can look for to see if you're at a higher risk for other chronic disease processes down the road, which is cool.
Yeah, I know your stool says a lot about your body.
Your poop tells me a lot. We talk poop all the time, and people are like, "Oh, this is weird."
I know.
No, it's really important.
It is. And so if you're gonna go see, a naturopath or doctor, what I did is I started to actually track my when I was going to the restroom, what it looked like through an app, which really was helpful in telling the doctors what was going on. So
yeah, very helpful.
Yep. So if you guys do that, I recommend it.
Yeah, and if you're not pooping, that's another issue. That's not healthy either. We should be having really, they say 3, and that's a stretch, but 2 healthy bowel movements, well-formed bowel movements a day. Like we need this to excrete toxins. We need it for, to excrete things in the body. So if you're not pooping daily, like that's a whole nother issue.
That's a problem. Yeah. So that kind of goes into hormones, which I want to talk about because it also relates to your gut health, right? So
yeah.
How does not going to the bathroom kind of affect your hormones?
Well, we're not able to excrete. So our liver processes literally everything we put in our body. So whether that's alcohol, food, medication, whatever the case may be, we metabolize through the liver, and then we, it goes through our bowels and we excrete them. So think about that. It's like, well, our liver's working, but where is it going? So it's just hanging out still in our bowels, which is not healthy. So yeah, it can definitely play a role in your hormone health. Also, like environmental toxins. So even if we try and reduce and get rid of these things, like even kill off the candida, like if we're not pooping, we don't have those detox pathways open. We only have really 3 routes of detox: sweat, pee, and poop. So most people are peeing fine, and if we're not sweating, like we need to work on sweat, and then pooping. Like pooping, I think is like the most important. And so yeah, if we got to get those in check. That's the same thing with like the gut. It's like, well, I look at the gut and I'm looking at your poop. Like, are you pooping? And are you pooping enough so that we can get this stuff out of you? Because otherwise it's not, we can't, like you're going to feel miserable. Think about doing like a detox protocol and you have everything bound up in your gut and you can't get it out. It's just still sitting there. No.
Terrible.
You're going to be miserable.
So when you have one autoimmune disease like celiac, are you prone to getting more?
I mean, it's possible, but it's not always true. So it does put you at a higher risk, I would say. But if you find it early and you know that you have these on and you understand like the modifiable risk factors, like you're not smoking, you're working on your stress, your diet is on point, you're exercising, like all of these things and correcting the imbalances in your body will put you at a very, very low risk of developing another autoimmune condition.
Yeah, that's a great point because I did develop Hashimoto's, but it was literally like just barely elevated. And so now I'm just able to get on a natural supplement to bring those levels down. So she said, you know, my endocrinologist said, you did such an amazing job your whole life of like really making sure that you're healthy as much as possible, even though I felt like the most unhealthiest person. And I kept fighting it and fighting, and I'm like, no, this is not going to overtake me, you know? So,
yeah.
Right. Exercising, all of the work that I've done over the years. And it was so nice to know like that paid off, because I could have been in a way worse place where if I wasn't doing those things, I wasn't taking those actions, like I probably would need to be on, you know, a prescription or whatever it may be. So, man, yeah.
Yeah.
So how does like gluten and celiac disease kind of play an effect on your hormones?
Well, it causes stress in the body. So this is therefore going to stress your adrenal glands, which is your fight or flight hormone, cortisol, that's produced by your adrenal glands. Your adrenal glands are little almond-shaped organs that sit up above your kidneys. So then that in turn causes our sex hormones to be imbalanced. So it's kind of like a domino effect in the body. So if we're under this chronic stress or even inflammation that can be caused by gluten or celiac, our adrenal glands, they produce more and more cortisol at the expense of our sex hormones. So especially progesterone. So I've seen a lot of not really any celiac or gluten, but people burning, or women burning through progesterone lately because of our current world affairs and the stress of 2020. So periods are all over the place. You know, they're heavier periods than ever, cramps, like fibroids, breast tenderness, like mood changes, like things are just going crazy with hormones, and it's likely due to stress. So that's the main root cause of what gluten and can do on your body, is really heighten that stress response.
Yeah, I feel it. And then that's where you get the major fatigue, and you keep having caffeine and it's not doing anything for you.
No, you're on this hamster wheel.
Yep. Yeah. Just recently, you know, you're talking about periods and how like, you know, you get heavy ones or they're really painful. And so I was having really painful ones. I just tried doing magnesium, like adding magnesium in my, you know, just taking it every day during this period. And it literally, I've had like no cramps.
Yeah.
Help? Like,
yeah. So magnesium is very anti-inflammatory. But it's also a very, very important vitamin that's involved in over 300 metabolic processes in the body. So by metabolic processes, I mean like getting from point A to point B in the body. So it's used as a cofactor. On the lab test, the window for magnesium is very, very, very small. So, but if you're on that lower end or even low, which I see quite commonly, you need to supplement with magnesium. I take magnesium before bed every single night. It's very calming. Like if I'm sure you've taken Epsom salt baths, like
Oh,
that's
100%.
magnesium.
Oh man, I didn't know that.
So there's different forms of magnesium though. You don't want, like, magnesium citrate is one that can induce bowel movements, like it's for constipation.
Right.
Magnesium threonate or bisglycinate are two of my favorites. Threonate is one that crosses the blood-brain barrier. It's the only form of magnesium that does that. So there's tons of different forms. So that's why making sure you're on the right form or taking the right form for what your body needs is important. But yeah, magnesium is wonderful.
Wow. Yes. A little pat on the shoulder for me. I love supplements. I mean, it just plays such a big role. I think that's kind of going to be my next question for, well, first of all, how does your thyroid play a big role in your gut health? Because I remember, I was texting you and I was like, oh my gosh, I got on this thyroid support, supplement. And all of a sudden, like, it really does help me use the restroom now even more. And it just keeps me, regulated, which it makes sense that not only did the SIBO play a role in not allowing me to go to the restroom, but then my thyroid was inflamed, So the other thing is I was on a medication, which is called Linzess. My gastroenterologist put me on that. They said, oh, you have IBS. I think it's called D or something like that, where it's the opposite. You can't go to the restroom versus you go too much. And so I was trying that out, and it was like, didn't help that much. I mean, it just kind of made me more scared of it because I didn't know when I was going to use the restroom. I had and so I didn't really like taking it, but it wasn't really treating the overall problem. It was just masking a symptom, and treating the symptom, but not really treating the problem. So I thought that was interesting that, maybe if you are on medication, you really might not need it, because if you fix the actual root problem, then you don't need it, But
yeah, sometimes the medication is just the Band-Aid. It's
like,
well, but then it can cause all these other side effects. And then think about it. If you're taking a medication, it's impairing your gut.
Yep.
Put two and two together. Like, how does that make sense? We're trying to help your gut.
It's common sense.
I know, we're trying to help it. So why would we give our body something else that's going to, disrupt it?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, how does thyroid support your gut health?
So the thyroid gland is this little butterfly gland right above your Adam's apple. It's essentially like in charge of plays a role in almost every single organ system in our body. So for gut health, like, it can regulate our bowel movement. So constipation or diarrhea, that's a very, very common symptom I see in my hypothyroid patients, which hypothyroid is suboptimal or sluggish thyroid, which is way more common than an overactive thyroid. But as far as like gluten and the thyroid, like, there's actually correlation between autoimmune thyroid disease and celiac disease, and even non-celiac wheat sensitivity. So this is because of that damaged intestinal barrier that allows for that increased intestinal permeability or that leaky gut. So there is really correlation. And an interesting fact I was reading too is that the fetal origin of the thyroid gland is the same as the stomach, digestive tract, and tongue. So I thought that was cool. Like, they actually are, very similarly shaped and developed. So yeah, I mean, there's a huge correlation.
Wow.
If you don't have a healthy gut, you're not going to be healthy. That's the moral of the story.
Yeah, that's it.
It's going to affect everything.
What are some natural ways to support your hormones and gut health? I know adding like some healthy fats in your diet, that's something that I was kind of missing because I was always on more of a low fat diet, which I don't think I was getting enough of those good ones like the chia seeds and all that kind of stuff.
Well,
supplements, and also
the first thing you have to do, I mean, before you even start, be like, hey, I'm going to take this supplement, is you've got to address the cause, or you're literally just throwing a dart. So if we don't figure out what's going on, whether that's, leaky gut, or your thyroid's unbalanced, or you have celiac, or there's a food sensitivity, or there's a toxin, or there's a parasite, like whatever the case may be, like, we're legit throwing a dart. So first, I highly recommend testing, and then we can go from there. So we can eliminate the foods that you might be reacting to. I mean, some people have such insane reactions to foods that it doesn't even make sense to do that, because their gut's so inflamed that they're going to react to everything. So we work on rebuilding the gut first. And then if there's still symptoms later, I mean, they're going to feel better. Then we can, talk about doing food sensitivity tests. Cause before that, you're going to react to everything, and you're going to be back to that. Well, what do I eat? And then people aren't going to follow that protocol, and they're like jumping ship, and they're just going to go back to their old ways and still feel miserable. So that's usually where I start. If someone just wanted to start right now, you could literally just stop with dairy and gluten. I challenge you to do it for like 2 weeks and see how you feel.
That's what I tell everyone.
Yeah, just see it. Just try it. It's so easy to be gluten-free. And I don't mean going to throw your cosmetics away, but at least the food, like eliminate the gluten in the food. I've had a patient that said she was gluten sober for like a month, and she was able to wear her wedding ring after 4 years of it not fitting.
Wow.
Like she lost that much inflammation in her body just by being gluten sober.
Wow.
So, but yeah, that's where you start. I mean, there's not really like a supplement that I'm like, hey, this is going to fix your, again, like you could buy all the supplements in the world, but is that really what's going on with your body? We don't know unless we look a little bit deeper. And that's why I'm like, instead of wasting money on supplements and all of this, like you could just remove the things that are inflammatory, like gluten and dairy, get some testing, and then go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we already talked about how stress can kind of come out in your blood work, which would be like cortisol, iron. Is there any other ones that we kind of didn't touch on?
I mean, everything else really, like stress honestly affects thyroid, adrenals, hormones, gut, mood, sleep. And think about that. Like if we're not sleeping because of stress and our cortisol is off, like our body's not able to repair as well as it should be. And it's not about being in bed for 7 to 8 hours. So, I recommend 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night. And that's not just being like in your bed. That means like actual sleep. So it's quality over quantity in this instant, because our immune system is the most active at nighttime. Our organs do all of its repair at nighttime because we're in that rest. We're in that rest and digest, that very, very, parasympathetic state where we want to be. And when we're up, we're usually always in a sympathetic state, and we're go, 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 go. So we need this time while you're sleeping to repair. So that's a huge thing. Like stress, if stress is so bad and it's affecting your sleep, we got to get you sleeping. We got to get you sleeping and pooping. Like those are the two main things that would be like the best that you can do for your body, is making sure those two things are in check.
Yeah. And reframing the mind, I think, especially when it comes to like having a disease or illness, I think that you build this like identity around it, or at least I did, definitely built an identity around, feeling alone and this of when I'm going to social gatherings and stuff like that. And finally this year, I'm like, you know what? No, I'm going to own this stuff. I'm going to like my mind. And then it really did do a lot within my body with like, when I do have stress, I'm able to handle it better, but also, I don't feel like fatigued all the time too, and it's just an amazing thing. So I feel like for everyone, they also need to really work on their mindset of, owning this. And for me, like I'm trying to help others in it. And so it gives me purpose of like helping people, which is.
Yeah. And you aren't your diagnosis. Like you can heal from this. You're a prime example of being in like the darkest of dark and feeling like terrible. And now look at you now, and you've done a lot of work, and it's taken some time. But you also have to remember too, you didn't get like this overnight either.
Nope.
So that's another thing with any disease process, or even like weight loss is a big one. Like you're not going to just drop the weight like that. Like you didn't gain the weight overnight, so you're not going to lose the weight. Same thing with any disease process or symptom in your body. Like it's going to take some time. Your body needs to heal. And think of like a cut on your finger. Like it just doesn't go away overnight. That takes a few days. I mean, things metabolically inside in your body are going to take longer than that. But we've been so focused in like we want that quick fix. Like that's like America. We want, that dopamine rush. We want, that pill that's going to make us feel better. but that's really only just a Band-Aid. So if you get to the root cause and you give your body what it needs to heal on its own, like you're going to live a life of happiness as long as you know what it is. Like you just have to figure out like why. Like that's what I'm, that nagging teenager or toddler that's asking why all the time. I'm like, why? But why? I don't understand why is this happening?
Yeah.
Like I know what to do, but I don't know why. Like I have to know the why. And that's like so important mentally, even for people, is like the why power versus the willpower. Like you have the willpower to do things, but do you have the why power?
Right.
So I mean, it's huge. This guy's like super smart.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you are dropping the weight super fast, it's probably in an unhealthy way, right?
It's gonna. So and I've seen that, and then they come to me because their hair's falling out, or they're so tired, or whatever the case may be. And I was like, yeah, you're starving yourself.
You're doing more damage to yourself than you're doing good. It's better to have a long-lasting lifestyle than a short span of let me drop 20 pounds or whatever and be.
Yeah.
And then you go later on, you just destroyed your metabolism and now you just gained a ton back. That's why I don't believe in like the whole, you know, all these crazy diets. I believe in flexible dieting, not cutting anything out that you love, like having a sustainable lifestyle. It's
Absolutely. That's the only way we're going to succeed. And that's the only way people do succeed, because if you were, I mean, with celiac, like, yeah, you're going to pay the price if you have gluten, you know, but that is like restrictive, like, no, because you know how it makes you feel. Right. But as far as like, you know, cookies and brownies and whatever, like go friggin' have the cookie, have the pizza. It's about a lifestyle. So if you know the healthy habits to have on the other days, like you're good. Like we need to reward ourselves. Yes. Like that's the dopamine we want, but we don't need that every single day.
Exactly.
I have pizza, I have a cookie, I have ice cream, but like the other 90% of the time I'm eating very, very clean. And that's how you develop a healthy life. It's not, you know, restrict. And it's like, okay, I'm going to have pizza. And then you have the pizza and then you have this guilt, remorse, and shame over it. And then you're like, I just messed up everything I just did for the last week. And then you just go back in your own ways. Like that's not effective. And I'm right there with you. I can't stand, you know, the restrictive diets. Like if you want to eat in a certain way, that's fine. But just know it's okay to splurge. It's okay to have that cheat meal.
Yeah. In moderation, everything in moderation.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I hear you, girl. Okay, so I just want to kind of wrap up of like what we talked about and just what like tests would you recommend, you know, getting overall for kind of repairing your gut health and looking into your overall body? What would you recommend a client when they come to see you and they don't know why this is happening?
So I typically start with just general labs. Most of these people haven't seen a practitioner or someone like me ever. So doing a comprehensive look at, you know, the thyroid, your adrenals, your sex hormones. I can do a couple gut markers via labs, depending on what's going on with your symptomatic picture. So I start with blood. Now, some patients are like adamant. They're like, I want to know, I really think I'm reacting to some foods. You know, can I add the food sensitivity testing? And sure, we can do that. And I don't really typically start there because like I said, if their gut is super impaired, everything's going to light up on that test and they're going to be left with potatoes, like something random. So I don't really recommend that first, but some people are, and I'm like, well, this is your body and this is your health. So I'm just here to help you. And then, you know, if there's a lot of, you know, a SIBO picture, then we can look into doing, you know, I just gave a patient a SIBO test because she's done her own research and she's like, I'm really interested in it. And I said, well, you know, I'm on the fence. If you want to do the test, we can do it. It'll rule it out for you or rule it in. We'll know. And she's like, yeah, I want to do it. So in that case, she's doing SIBO. Like this dual test is good for overall health, especially for one that's like been on a hamster wheel and seen a lot of practitioners and they still don't have an answer. That's when I would look at the stool because again, likely their gut hasn't been addressed. But yeah, I usually just start with like general labs because I'm looking at you as a whole and it's all connected as we've already discussed.
Yeah. And why is it so important to make sure you get the blood work done at a naturopath versus a regular doctor? Because I know I went to so many regular doctors. When I came to see you, you really, you know, showed me a lot more than typically them. And I think a lot of people think I know naturopaths are really becoming the more up and up, and people are trusting in them more. But sometimes people think, oh, no, I'm good. My doctor says I'm good, so I'm fine. But yet they still have problems.
So I mean, really it's because I'm nosy. Like I draw a lot of labs, but it's because I'm looking at you as a whole, and I'm going to look at everything. So most medical doctors were really just focused on their like zone, or if it's, women's health, they're just going to look at, a couple hormones, or you go to your gastro, they're just going to look at a couple things. Like naturopaths, we treat the whole body, we treat the whole person. So that's why seeing, getting blood work done by someone like us, or even a functional medicine doctor, like we're going to draw a little bit more than the average medical doctor, because we're looking outside the box, and we're, really looking at you as a whole and getting that complete picture, because it's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I highly recommend you. I hope that whoever's watching this, goes to you and asks you questions that they may have, and schedules with you. You're located in Arizona and Gilbert. So anyone located locally in Arizona, be willing to even drive on the East Valley, because she's phenomenal. Where can people find you and to schedule with you?
Yeah, so my private practice is in Gilbert, South Gilbert. All my information is on my website at drerinellis.com. I'm highly, highly, highly active on social media. I love Instagram. I'm on Facebook, more so on Instagram. So you can find me there at dr.erinellis. No com. But yeah, you can say, if you've watched this and seen any questions, you can find me over there and DM me. I run my own Instagram page. But yeah, I would love to help. And even more than that, like I just like doing this because I love to teach, and there's a lot of education that needs to be done around health in general. And just doing this is gives me satisfaction. So thank you for having me and letting me able to provide some teaching today.
Yeah, and the thing is, you went through being unhealthy, which had lymphoma cancer, and so it's really near and dear to your heart to help people heal and get better. And so I think it's just like you're more than a doctor, because you just, you went through having chemo and losing hair and all this stuff that was so hard on you, and you're triumph through it with your amazing like mental like ability. You were just champion over it, which I love. So everyone just know she will find the answers.
Yep, I do. That's what I pride myself on. I'm pretty good at it. But yeah, life is too short to feel suboptimal. So if you're one that's on that hamster wheel with health, like find you a good doctor that will find the cause.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Erin. I appreciate it. And
thank you.
We'll jump on another one and learn some more.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks.